us today. We're going to be starting very shortly. We're just going to give a few more minutes, few more moments to let people kind of join the webinar. So we'll be back in just a moment. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Derek Lee. I'm a physical therapist and clinic director at our Spear Murray Hill location. We're located on East 34th Street. I'd like to welcome back those of you who have attended our webinars before, as well as welcome those of you who are joining us for the first time. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days and schedules to learn a little bit with us. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're Spear. It's a private practice, private outpatient physical therapy and occupational therapy practice. It's been around for over 20 years with currently 21 offices all across New York City. We've successfully been able to continue to offer in-person care through the pandemic, as well as launched our Spear Live platform for those of you that are more comfortable taking your session from home. In our clinics, we are strategically going above and beyond CDC guidelines to ensure safety and well-being of everyone involved. You can find more detailed information about our safety standards and measures by visiting our website at spearcenter.com. We're here in whichever way makes you feel most comfortable. If you're looking for individualized care, either in the clinic or through telehealth, please reach out to us at your convenience, and we'll gladly set you up an appointment. We're excited to be with you today. We're discussing one of New York's favorite topics and activities, which is running. We're going to be discussing a few things, one of which being shoe anatomy and programming ideas, as well as some training ideas, as well as going over some helpful running-based exercises. As part of the session today, we'll be talking through demonstrating some exercises, doing a little stuff. By all means, get up and participate. Kind of go through it a little bit with our presenters. Please know if you're ever experiencing pain or discomfort, feel unsteady, feel unsafe doing them on your own, definitely stop. Reach out to us directly, and we'll be able to support you. As you can see, some of us are coming from you live from our own home, and although we don't really anticipate any problems coming up with any technical issues, please be patient with us if issues do arise to try to navigate kind of the whole system. Throughout the webinar, we want to hear from you. This is supposed to be interactive. We want to hear some questions, be able to pick these guys' brains a little bit. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. There's a Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen. You'll see the Q&A option. That's where you can just dump your questions, and we'll do our best to address them, as many as we can during the webinar and live. It's best you put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat, because that's where we'll kind of be compiling them. For those of you who are watching through YouTube Live, we are monitoring the comments section there as well, so feel free to drop them in there too. Lastly, there will be times where multiple panelists are on the screen. For the best viewing experience and be able to see everybody at once, just select a gallery view at the top right corner of the screen, and you'll be able to see everybody kind of at once. All right, so we're going to get into the goals of today. Some exciting stuff. We're going to be covering the anatomy of a sneaker, some programming ideas for your upcoming 5K, exercises and cross-training ideas, and as well as answering all your questions and trying to get to them today as well. Before we get started, I do want to introduce our team of panelists. Super excited to bring these people to you. They're really excited to bring this topic. We're going to welcome kind of everybody on the screen now. Our presenters today are Sebastian Altomarino and Alberto Segura Jr. Sebastian's our clinical director and physical therapist at our Spear West 67th Street location. Alberto is a physical therapist at our Brooklyn Heights office. Hey, what's going on, Sebastian, Alberto?
Hey, everyone. Hi.
How are we doing?
Awesome. And then lastly, we have John McCary, who's also a physical therapist and also the clinical director at our Long Island City office. He's going to be helping us most with the Q&A section. What's going on, John?
What's up, Derek? How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. All right, guys, let's get started. John and I are going to be saying goodbye for now. Sebastian and Alberto, we're going to let you take it away with some information on sneakers.
Awesome. I'll start it off. Hello, everyone. Like Derek said, thanks for dedicating your time to learn and listen about a topic we both enjoy. We decided to center this topic around a play on words of, learning to talk the talk or walk the walk when it comes to a particular topic. And I think a lot of the previous sessions that we've offered through the webinars cover a lot of great things. So we were trying to figure out, where do we fill these gaps? And I think when we talk about equipment and when we talk a little bit about programming, hopefully we can kind of fulfill a little bit of those little details. So we're going to talk about equipment first, and I'll actually come and bring my own sneakers that I have here. So what you're going to see is two of the same sneakers, just maybe one a little bit more used and one barely used for the purpose of the presentation so far. I can't wait. So what you're going to see first is that a sneaker, for the most part, will have a very breathable upper portion. Definitely meant for you to have a breathable foot. You need that thing to be cool while you're running your miles. Usually lighter weight, so that's what you kind of want to look for in that direction. The midsole, if there's anything you take away from a shoe anatomy, it's look at the midsole. The midsole is, as it sounds, the middle of the shoe. It's where the most cushion is. It's where the most support will come from. And it's really how you start to tell if your sneakers should probably be replaced. So maybe, to my eyes, it looks a little more obvious. But this is the one that has about 350 miles. This one we have about 10. So when you look at the middle of the sole, you can't really tell if one's a little flatter than the other. But what you'll notice is that the outside starts to get a little flatter. Now, that's just the way I land, and that's the way that my body reacts to my shoe. Now, what you'll also notice is the bottom, the outsole, right? So easiest place to look at, how thin are my treads going? Like any tire of a bike or a car. My treads started to really go. Yeah, that means no good support from the bottom. Start to think about replacing them. That's what we should be looking at, some nice, good treads. Obviously, depending on the sneaker, you'll look at different midsoles that will provide different stability for you, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But I have to say, the midsole is so important. You're seeing things like Peblax foam in the new Nike runs, the Next Percents. There's a reason why all these triathletes and maybe like marathon runners that are, top level, besides having incredible stamina and just a lot of great training, they have great equipment, and they can spend the $300 on these latest technology, foams for their sneakers. Even some of them have carbon plates, as some of you may own them. Yeah, the research supports that you'll be a little bit better. But when we're talking about 0.3 seconds or, another second quicker per mile to the person just learning to run a 5K, maybe it is important to you, maybe it isn't. But take that into consideration when you're just trying to get into it. Thankfully, it's a relatively cheap sport if you want it to be. So, when we look at the toe box, different brands of a shoe will have a wider toe box than others. So don't necessarily think that you need just like a wide, style of a sneaker. Sometimes some brands will actually offer a wider toe box, which is this little region right here. Ultras, for example, do have a relatively nice wide toe box. Not that I'm plugging in a name, just what they're known for. So another part that's always important when you're shopping around for your sneaker is the drop of a shoe. The drop of a shoe is the difference between the height between the heel and the forefoot. The greater the drop, the steeper the angle between your heel and your forefoot. So for example, when you're barefoot, the heel and forefoot touch to the ground should be 0, right? There's nothing really kind of changing that. So although you may see a lot of cushion on the back end of a shoe, try to relate it to the front, and that'll give you a relative term to how much drop there is in your shoe. Now, why is that even important? It'll relate to how you're going to land when you're actually running. Regardless of how you land, your shoe will actually push you towards a particular style. So when you're having something that's a little more neutral, you're more likely to land, however you do land. Maybe it's a heel, maybe it's more midfoot. The thicker it is, you're definitely going to go heel because you're going to feel that cushion support. It's going to make contact to the ground faster because there's a higher drop. So more than happy to go into toe drop and drop of the shoe all day. But it is something you want to look at. Between the midsole, the drop of the shoe, these are the 2 factors, besides if it's a neutral, stability, or motion control, that will make the difference in what you pick. So on that topic, you'll see that in this slide, there's a neutral example, a stability example, and a motion control example. The gray is what indicates that. It should make sense that something like a neutral shoe, maybe no gray, doesn't really have a lot of stability. You're looking at something that has like a 0 to 4 millimeter drop. As you start going down this column, you're going to see that stability. Maybe you have a little bit of a plastic post on the middle of the shoe. Some of you can actually make contact when you tap it. It'll make like a plastic sound that you're hitting. Yeah, that is meaning that you're going to have a lot more feedback. Interestingly enough, shoes that have a lot of cushion and a lot of support in the beginning will actually create more forces through your leg. And that should make sense. That's because they're stiffer. They're not broken in yet. So keep that in mind. Wear your running shoes for running only. I can't stress this enough. I spoke about it just recently. My shoes around 380 miles, I tapped out and I said, that's all they're going to give me. You should be going between 300 and 430 miles per shoe, that you're using it for. Now, Sebastian, how do you even know that? How do you track your shoe per mile? Well, thankfully, things like Strava allows you, if you're aware of Strava, right? This application of measuring your run and your distance and kind of gauging your activities, they'll be able to have a section where you can put your sneaker and you can choose the sneaker you're going to use that day in the app. And that way you can track your mileage a little bit better. It's a neat little feature that will allow you to kind of keep a better track as opposed to maybe the other method of just writing it down. I think that you should take into consideration the point that I made about buying new sneakers and having a firmer cushion in the beginning because it hasn't adapted to your pounding pressure of your foot. So maybe begin with a little bit of walking in them, just break them in if you've heard of that before. Maybe not your first 5K to run with a fresh new pair of sneakers. So keep that in mind. As an aside, I think I want to talk a little bit about like wearable devices, because when I talk about the anatomy of a sneaker, I think it's also important to talk about how you're going to track some of these things. The best wearable, most accurate device is to wear a watch and a chest strap, a wearable chest strap device. That's if you want your most accurate data. Some will have a chip that you can use even around your shoelaces. That is pretty helpful as well. But once again, it depends on the spectrum that you want. How much information is really that useful to you, and how much could even help when you're in rehab or if you're going more towards a performance standpoint. As a past exercise scientist and background in it, I geek out at all the data. So I definitely want the most and I want everything because that will kind of help me with the intricacies of my run. So at the end of the day, I just want you guys to understand this. Don't forget why you're running. Every once in a while, maybe intentionally leave the watch and headphones at home and perform a self-analysis on your body to understand what you're feeling. One of the things we spoke about was how do we introduce maybe meditating to running? Because it's it can get kind of intense as you're getting higher in the mileage. I have heard runners use chants or mantras, which I'm not going to ask you to say as you're running, but have a saying, have something that means something to you. Personally, mine is another step. So when I'm at mile 22 in the marathon, I'm thinking about just another step. And just repeat that to yourself. If for whatever reason you're not able to, just stop and collect your thoughts and then just keep going again. That is really where you're centering your body and your mind and really scanning how you're feeling. Because if you're not really aware of your body, you're going to have to come to one of us to help you be a little bit more aware of it, which we're all for. So now you probably know you can run the run because you can look like it, but can you understand the definitions of the activities that you might see in a program? So when looking at it, I think it's valuable to maybe define what you're going to see. Different programs will have a variety of these terms. So I think it's important to just define some of them for you. Fast, pretty self-explanatory. You just want to run fast. This may be at a pace that is 30 to 45 seconds faster than you would normally run. And that's, kind of gauging that a little bit with a wearable device like a watch or your phone might be the easiest way to do that. But if you see fast, try to run fast. Long runs, try to just run at a comfortable pace as far as maybe the program is asking you to go. When we're talking about a 5K, that might be more towards the 3-mile run. As you get closer and inch towards race day, that's something you want to think about. Don't be afraid to walk or stop to take a drink of water. This should be an enjoyable thing. You should not try to punish yourself here. Long runs. Interval training, what a segue, because these are the ones where you feel like you're punishing yourself. These are more like sprint repeats, a little bit more of an advanced term. Before you start this workout, you should definitely be warming up, doing a dynamic warm-up, and then kind of doing a few test sprints. You'll see things like 4 400s or 4 100s. It's usually talking about meters. And you can do this at a track, or any open space that you have available, down the FDR drive, as long as there's, not a lot of bikers crossing your pathway. So keep that in mind when you see sprint repeats. It's a very truncated part of your workout regimen. Shouldn't take too long, but it's very important to help you with gaining a little bit of speed for your next program. Tempo runs. This one gets a little confusing because it's a combination of a few of the terms I just listed. A tempo run, think of it as a hill. You start off a little slow, you're working your way up to a faster pace, maybe 30 to 45 seconds faster than you normally would run, and then you come back down. And you keep running though, you don't stop. And then that's your cool down run, and that's your tempo run. It's a nice increase and decrease. Some individuals really like to challenge themselves and will do multiple tempo loops, where you're going to do that for an extended amount of time. If we're talking about marathon training, right, you're going to be doing this for 18-mile runs, 22-mile runs. You're going to go through some tempo runs through there. But for the sake of a 5K race, just think of it as a minute, 30 seconds, something achievable. And, we talk about rest. I can't stress how important rest is when you're running and working out multiple days a week. Rest is important for the body, and we just don't give ourselves enough of it. So when you're going for those long runs, understand that you rest maybe the day before or the day after. So that's how that program will need rest, in your week, because, there's only 7 days out of the week. So I hear stretch and strengthen, you're going to hear a little bit from Alberto about that. There's a huge applicability to running and actually being strong. On the inverse, not so well. The research doesn't support the other side of it. But if you can get a little stronger in plyometric activity, and agility work, and adapt your body to tolerate the forces that you're asking it to perform, you're going to do a lot better day after day. There's no secret that, when you're running, you're creating forces through your skeleton and body. And that's actually a great thing. It actually helps produce bone growth. But at the same time, you want to be fair in your strength program while you're training for a race. Shouldn't be maxing out, right before your race day. Racing, some advanced programs will ask for a race during your program. So, a 5K program, which you're going to see later, is going to have an 8-week interval of time that you have to train for. And maybe at week 4, you're going to do a trial 5K. You're just going to go for it. You're going to see and kind of self-analyze. So sometimes you're going to want to actually go the distance. In this case, a 5K is one of those scenarios. Some people, and when we talk about marathon, they're not going to do a marathon before they run the actual marathon. And people are on either side of that pendulum. But that's a decision you have to make, an educated decision you have to make with the people that you train with. So let's go into 2 program ideas. One that's a little bit more towards a novice route, and the next one that will be more towards an intermediate, a little bit more advanced. So I defined a bunch of definitions before for you, but the simplest ones here are rest, run, and that's basically it. It should be pretty straightforward. And for that reason, it should be straightforward so you can make it an achievable goal to train. It's an 8-week program. That's going to allow enough time for your body to adapt to the stress that you're asking it to perform for you. These things are not written in stone, right? So I'm not saying this is the gold standard for training for your first 5K. I'm saying this is what it could look like. Listen to your body. Skip a day if you need to. Maybe yoga is a better thing to do instead of that 30-minute walk. It's okay. Just listen to your body. So keep that in mind. For the next program that you're going to see, it's going to include a little bit more diversity in terms of things like sprint repeats and tempo runs. So like I had said before, on that first week, 5 times 400. What does that even mean? That means you're running 400 meters 5 times. And guess what? That's your workout. That's all you do. That's all you do. The next day, you're going to have a 3-mile run, and then you rest. So obviously, you use this to your knowledge, but then modify it as you feel necessary. Obviously, in this program, like I had alluded to before, week 4, you're doing a 5K test. So you're already going to have You're already going to have ran a 5K before week 8. So, keep that in mind as well, that you'll do a little trial before you go for it. Choose wisely. So I think what you have to consider with these 2 programs is, the distance per the run, if you can handle it, where you're going to run, especially in New York City. Do you want to run on concrete? Do you want to run on the brittle path in Central Park? Do you want to run on the Grand Lawn? Do you want to run in Long Island? The list goes on and on. But it will have a factor on your body. And what I think one of the things that gets missed sometimes is choosing the same route. Be careful with that. Roads have camber, and depending where you run, there might be a little bit of a curve or an edge. You run on the side of a road. Your body will be constantly stressed in that same direction. So run the distance, but vary up the surfaces for your own benefit. Distribute the force and the loads as best as you can. Now, a taboo topic, the 10% rule that you hear, increasing your mileage by 10% per week. A good guideline. Once again, if you know anything about research or running for that matter, the deeper you get into it, the less you understand. The reality is, Bruist in 2008 was a group of researchers. They found no difference in injury rates between the 10% group and the advanced training group. And that goes to show that although it's a nice standard measure that you can try to slowly help specificity and adaptation, maybe it's more specific than that. So another thing that I think is very important, greater push off in a shorter period of time yields faster running. So smaller steps, less force per step equals maybe less likelihood of injury. So that's just a little tidbit. I think at this point, there's enough information to help you guys kind of get started. So why don't we switch gears to the concepts of cross-training?
Hi. So now we're going to talk about some of the issues that surround the actual running, namely cross-training, warm-ups, and cool-downs. We'll get a bit into the what's and whys of each. When we're getting into running, one will usually notice we can't just get off the couch and jump right into it and be the rock stars that we can be. So what's holding us back? And one of the number one things that really comes to the top is sitting. So much so in its impact that some people term it the new smoking. The reason for that is that in the research we find what we call a dose response between sitting and mortality of all causes, as well as cardiovascular disease, independent of leisure time activity. So in English now, dose response means I add A and then B happens. The more A I add, the more B happens. So the more I add sitting into my life, the more bad things happen, and especially the things that lead to humans not being alive. So sitting, grand scheme of things, is bad. We want to do less of it. With specifically to running, though, it has a powerful effect on decreasing our cardiovascular capacity. It really decreases our joint motion, so the actual amount of motion that's available in the joints, and the muscle extensibility, which is the ability of that muscle to move across whatever joint motion we have. The big thing to remember with that is the body is at all times a use it or lose it proposition. So if we're using it to sit down, which a lot of us have been lately in this past year, then there are some things we're going to lose in that. So the big takeaway from that I want you to have is stand up impact on your ability to get up and get out and run. The other thing is how we run. It's an issue simply because for folks new to running, we really haven't practiced it yet. And as you delve into running, you'll hear about different styles of running, especially with respect to how your foot hits the ground. Basically, it's we talk about the heel strike, where the heel's the first thing that hits down. Midfoot strike, where somewhere in between the heel and the toes hits down first, and then the forefoot strike, where it's really the toes back to the ball of the foot hitting the ground first. And each has its own associated issues, since each type of foot strike loads the structures in your body somewhat differently from each other. And some folks have some strong ideas about right and wrong with running, but I'm of the school of thought that as long as it's safe and repeatable, any gait pattern is fair game, and that's especially so for the beginner runner. So I also want to introduce a little more about the idea of specificity training, with which Sebastian talked about a little bit. And what is it? Basically, it's you get better at a thing if you practice that thing. So if I'm going to be better at running, I need to go out there and run. But because motor patterns aren't set and muscles aren't fully accustomed to these new motions that we're asking them to do when we go out and run, if we're new to it, having a way to train and gain while not overusing the structures that you need for running is a useful thing. And we see that specific training is a lot more important in the highly trained individual. So think people you might see on TV or see from the stands at an event. And cross-training is more important to the rest of us in the general population, as it helps with overall fitness. And this leads to an idea put out by Chris Powers, who's a PT and researcher out of USC. And I don't know if it's a hot take, but it is a little spicy. And his big thing is you have to be fit to run. You should not run to get fit. And that's a bit extreme, but it's got a kernel of truth to it. One of the big things is like, the reason a lot of us get into running in the first place is we're trying to get more fit. So, how does that idea help us? But the way I envision it, what I take away from it is that the startup costs to our bodies in running can be pretty high. And something like cross training provides a way to build up without asking too much of one body part over another, and allowing us to get fit while we run, rather than having to wait for some magical time when we're fit and then starting to run. And cross training can also help with some as a psychological change up. We don't want to, like have too much cake. Like we enjoy something and have a little too much of it, then like maybe having something a little something else to change things up would be nice. As well as for injury recovery type of issues. Say we're going along, we trip, we fall, we pick something up, we strain ourselves. Having a change up to our running will help us get back to things a little sooner. And so cross training specifically, we mentioned it a couple times now. So what is it? It is just athletic training in sports other than the athlete's usual sports. So if we're talking about ourselves as runners, which we should be, then it's just anything else we do outside of running that that will help our running. And again, like we mentioned earlier, the goal is overall performance. And why should we cross train? Because when you're starting up, running is hard. And as we mentioned before, cross training provides a way to build up without asking too much of one part over another. We know that there's strong applicability with cross training to running, especially with non-specific training effects between endurance sports. So in plain English, what that means is if I go out and swim, it won't make me run better directly, but I will work my cardiovascular system in a way that will make running easier. And if I go out and lift weights, it won't make me run better directly, but it will make it easier for my muscles and bones to accept the loads of running. And so, options. What can we do to help to help further our running? What are our cross training options? One of two of the most popular ones are right there at the top: lifting weights and riding the bike. But there's also swimming and skating, whether ice or wheel, depending on your season, and cross-country skiing. Not so much downhill, but with cross-country skiing. Those last two in particular are nice change-ups because they really, really work a lot of the hip musculature that we don't usually get to work out in running and on the bike, with a lot of lateral push-off motion. So I'm also a bit biased. I am predominantly a cyclist, and I use running as one of my cross-training options. And so I'm going to shill for why I think the bike is the best alternative, or at very least a great one. One is that the load demand of running versus the load demand of cycling. When we look at running, we're talking about roughly 2.5 times your body weight with each footfall, every time your foot hits. And that's why cushioning gets so important, whether through our bodies or through our footwear. Talk about cycling, we're really talking about 0.17 times your body weight. It's based on like 150 pound person riding at a normal pace, about this fast, with spinning their cranks about this fast, and an average size crank. So, it is a lot less wear and tear on the body. It is a lot harder footfall on the body. Another thing that is very helpful is that it has a similar optimal cadence. When we're talking about running cadence, what we've seen in research is that people tend to do better if their feet are coming down at about 170 to 180 steps per minute. And in cycling, we see, especially in studies on professional cyclists, that at about 85 to 95 revolutions per minute ends up being optimal. 1 revolution is equal to 2 steps, because if I'm on a crank, I go around once, each foot has changed position 1 time. So, 1 revolution equals 2 steps in that. The other thing is that there's a difference in the postural muscle demands. Running tends to ask our postural muscles, so a lot of our back and our hip musculature, to be a little more bent backwards. Cycling puts us in a little more of a forward bent position. And though I wanted to be clear about something, for either one of those, a neutral spine is best. So in between, not being too slouched forward, not being too bent backward, but in between. But the forces that are applied to the body impart a bending back motion when we run and a little more of a forward bending motion when we bike. And the other is availability. Now, bikes can get expensive. I understand that, especially in recent days, there's been a lot of buying of bikes, which makes them less available and sometimes a little more expensive. But you do not need the very best bike to get the benefits of cross training from a bike. Any bike will do. So if you pull something out of an aunt or uncle's garage, if you go down by a local co-op, if you rent a city bike, any of those options will give you a gateway to using a bike as not only a means of transportation, but a means of cross training for your running. And so that kind of leads us over to the warm up and cool down, the bookends of our running sessions. And why do they matter? Why would we do these? New Yorkers, we're busy. We don't have a whole lot of time, as I'm finding out here, but we do want to make time for this because it'll help out a lot, especially with active warm up, has shown to increase performance in tasks that last more than 5 minutes. And if you're running, you're probably going to be doing it for a little longer than 5 minutes total. And that's if it allows the athlete to begin the task, in our case, running, in a relatively non-fatigued state. So as long as it doesn't tire you out too much, then a warm-up is going to be a good thing towards your running performance. With active cool down, we find that it accelerates recovery of lactate in blood. Now, I think we've all heard of lactic acid and how it causes pain and how it causes performance decreases. And so the cool down helps decrease the amount of lactate in the blood. That's a good thing. Performing active cool downs may partially prevent immune system depression and promote fast recovery of the cardiovascular and respiratory system. If you've ever pushed it a little too hard on a run or on any exercise, and the next day you come up with a little bit of a cough, that's what they're talking about there with the immune system depression and cardiovascular and respiratory system recovery. And so let me show you a couple of things. Excuse me a moment and get ourselves set up a bit here. And feel free to join along. And so first thing I want to do is just a bit of an arm swing. Just to get things warmed up before we run. We're not going to use our arms a whole lot when we run, but we do want to have them a little looser so we don't have a whole lot of tightness when we try to breathe. Next, we want to do a bit of a leg swing. Now, I'll have this chair right here for a little bit of balance. You can freestand, but I like to hold on to something. So all you're going to do, swing back and forth. Loosen up the hips, loosen up the back. Because we don't want the other side to get jealous, I'll do the other leg too. Try not to kick the wall behind me. Now, another thing we want to do is a bend forward and a bend back. I'll give you the side view of that. Nice and easy. Reaching down, I usually just have people have the arms, follow the legs, reach down as far as you can. If it's here, it's here. If it's down here, great. And then coming back up and leaning backwards. And then back through again. Next, I'll pull this friendly chair over. We'll do a squat and transition to a hamstring stretch. So I'm going to come down, help myself a little bit with the chair, let myself come down, and then straighten out, come back down, straighten out. Now say you don't have the best flexibility in the world. I'm going to pull that chair a little closer. I'm going to just lean on top of it. You know, if my back's a bit tight, if my hips are a bit tight, I come forward, this might be enough. Maybe if I have an armchair, then maybe leaning on the arms of the chair will be enough. So we'll just go down to there, squat down a bit, back up. All we're trying to do is put a little more stretch in these structures all the way and back. Next, take you through, which is a little more complicated, a little downward dog motion with a bit of an ankle pump. So this will get a little bit of our core muscles activated, a little bit more motion and work into the shoulders, but also stretch out our calves a bit. So I'm going to come up and just a little bit of a pumping back and forth with the feet. I know those that are more practiced at yoga than I will point out that I'm not quite all the way back in the downward dog. That's okay. The last one I want to show you is nicknamed the marching A. And it's basically just an in-place marching motion that when you're starting up, just to make sure everything's moving in the right way. But as you ramp up, as you get into it a little more, you'll find that you're able to use it in a more active warm-up way, and that becomes almost a bit of a skip. And sometimes as you're going through your motion, it'll tell you a little bit more about how you're feeling, how you're moving, how different parts of your body, maybe my hip's a little tight and I'm having trouble picking it up as I go through my, my motion. Maybe my back's a little tight. Maybe I'm leaning back a little. And so it's something that's very basic that'll let you loosen up a bit, but it can become a powerful tool towards telling you how you are on any particular day. Now, in terms of cool downs, I tend to thin it out a little bit. Usually, I've done a good warm up, I've done a good run. I will tend to hang on some of the cool down stuff and just sit into it for a little more extended time. For the warm up, we want a little more motion. We want a little more verve. We're not holding any particular position very long. For the cool down, we're simmering down. We're getting back to our regular motion. So we don't want to be pushing super hard. We don't want to be moving a whole lot. We're just cooling things down. So the first one I want to do is that squat and hamstring stretch, but we're going to hold it a little longer. I'm going to pull my friendly chair in a little closer again. And I'm just going to squat down. I'm going to hang out there for a little bit, let my back stretch out, let my hips stretch out, let my ankles stretch out. Let's say it's been about 20 seconds. And just come up again. And I'll repeat that 2 or 3 times. Downward dog again. Again, we're looking to hold it a little more at any particular one position. So I'm going to sit on one ankle for a bit, then the other. We'll repeat that a couple of times. And the last one I want to introduce is child's pose, which is sitting back on your heels. Now, if you've got a little bit of a flexibility issue, there's nothing wrong with putting a pillow here between your hips and your heels. You're sitting back as far as you can comfortably, letting your shoulders drape forward. Again, holding that about 20 seconds. And with that, let's kick things back over to Derek.
All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for all that. Great information. Start up a few really good questions as well. So let's go ahead and get into a couple of these. So starting off, let's talk about some shoes. So what do you guys think about running in minimalist shoes? So like zero drop shoes, just little cushioning, that sort of thing.
I'll add my take on that. If you've been running in minimalist shoes your whole life, should be no issue. If you're just getting into it, dip your toes into it. Very slow approach, should not be doing your regular mileage, mostly because your body is not prepared to adapt to those forces and loads. So, people either love it or hate it. And the reality is, you should try to explore it, but be very careful about the increase in that stress, because your body will feel that.
Yeah, and I definitely tend to think in that vein too, in that I almost think of it like a split. You can train just about anyone to do it to a certain level, but it matters how much does it really matter to you to be able to do it. We grow up with shoes, and so our feet are accustomed to working within shoes. To change things up for that one activity has to matter enough. I know that and also when we talk about minimalist shoes, there's a bit of a spectrum. There is minimalist support where you can still have a fair amount of cushion on it, but still have a lot of flexibility in your shoe. You can still kind of curl up into a little ball, but have, 15, 20 millimeters of cushion on it. But then there's also those that are just bare piece of rubber that you strap to your foot. And those are its own little ends of the spectrum. So even with minimalist shoes, there's a pretty wide range of what we can talk about. I'd say if it's something that someone wants to get into, first thing to do is walk around barefoot at home, and then get the thinnest soled shoe you can and walk around outside in that and see how you feel. And if you find that your feet are just worn down, then you have a chance to either push into it a little more or decide maybe this isn't for me. And this is something that you can kind of try for yourself, and something that those of us in the PT community and those in the running community can definitely help guide people through.
100%. Awesome. Great answer. In the same vein, I think shoes tend to be a pretty big topic for a lot of people. There's a lot of information out there. So a question about kind of best shoes for different striking patterns. So if you're running on your toes more so, versus running on your heel versus a midfoot runner, do you have any comments about that?
I'll go for it on that one. So when I was talking about drops, right? And actually, this is a nice segue from the last question. So when there's something like, if you're sprinting, right? Someone put it in the chat. Yeah, like something like a minimalist will feed more towards a 4-foot run, because when you sprint, you're usually doing it on the 4-foot. You don't see sprinters really going more on the heel. So yeah, that feeds more towards that type of landing or mechanics or training style. But when we're talking about heel strikers, which 80% of the population is really feeding towards, you're going to probably want a little bit more cushion there. Or if you're trying to get more towards a midfoot, which is, kind of one of the more ergonomic shifts that we're trying to get people towards, which is not too much heel, not too much 4-foot, because of the changes. I think the more important fact or takeaway is, what are you going to change in the adaptation of your muscle to satisfy the shoe that you get as well? So whether it be a very, big drop where you're going to land on your heel a lot, or something that's 4 millimeters. This is a 4 millimeter shoe. It basically almost has no drop. So I land more on my midfoot towards the heel as opposed to 4-foot when I'm running longer distances. So that's my take on that.
Yeah. Definitely agree with that. And in terms of brands, a lot of the bigger brands have tried to start catering a little more towards each different foot strike. Like a lot of brands will have, something that's a little more heel strike friendly than something a little more midfoot strike friendly, and even something that's a little more 4-foot friendly. And there are definitely other smaller specialty brands that say, we're going to be the ones that try to own that 4-foot strike space. And we're going to cater as much as we can to this 80% market that is heel strikers. And so there is no shortage of options. What I've usually seen people have the most success with is popping into a good running shoe store in trying a gazillion different shoes. And usually that's what they're equipped to do. They want you to try things, try this versus that brand. This brand will have a little different fit from that brand. This brand will have a little different drop from that brand, and finding the brand and the model that suits you best, and then seeing how that suits your running.
Yeah, I like that. There's a couple quick things just about shoes that we could, I think, answer relatively quickly. Somebody asked a question about, not necessarily looking at one brand over another, but are there any that have real solid support for an older runner, or like just good supporting, good arch shoes?
People love Hoka's, people love Brooks, people love Asics. These are, 3 brands in particular. We could go down the line, but the reality is, Brooklyn Running Company did a March Madness for sneakers, and the one that ended up winning was like the Clifton, the Hoka's. Older doesn't necessarily mean like a type of shoe, right? So it's more so, what did you run and enjoy in the past? And that's kind of my.
Yeah, that's
takeaway.
For sure. Kind of move on, maybe a different topic, just have time for everything. There's a couple other good questions about non-shoe related things too. So do you guys have any recommendations or strategies just for increasing intensity, like pace versus distance, that sort of thing?
I think a lot of that depends on what your goal is. If your goal is marathon, then we're probably leaning more towards distance over pace. If your goal is 5K, then you're probably going to be leaning into pace over distance. So a lot of that's going to depend on what your specific goal is.
Yeah, the tempo runs and the interval sprints are the 2 best types of training methods to try to advance your pace if you're trying to do that.
Awesome. As far as cross training goes, how do you guys feel about like the elliptical or rebounding? Any thoughts on that?
I like the elliptical as a rehab tool for runners. It roughly mimics a circular gait. It is upright. It doesn't unload as much as the bike, but it is not a bad thing. It is not at all a bad thing. The only thing that I tend to ask runners to do on the elliptical is to watch your posture on them, because it's easy to have your posture go way wrong on one.
My personal opinion, just it mimics running a little too close sometimes, and that muscle activation. For cross training, you're trying to maybe get some other things going. Just my take.
Awesome. Love it. I think we got time for really one more. As somebody who's kind of an intro new runner, beginner to running, how do you know what your strike pattern is? Like, you're not really familiar with it. How do you know if you're running on your toes or not?
Have someone to take a video of you, someone you trust. Have them just as you're running somewhere where someone can take a video of it. A lot of phones now can do slow-mo, and you can just slow it down. Huddle Technique is a great free app that I personally use to look at my runners and slow down their momentum to really look at that pattern. So that's my best advice there.
I'm also a big fan of Huddle. Just have someone take a peek at it is great advice.
Love it. Great answers, guys. Great questions to everybody as well. I think we're going to wrap up a little bit here, but we really hope today's talk was super valuable and that you guys learned a lot about running, different treatment methods, lifestyle modifications, just to better help your training and getting into running. If we didn't get to your question, we're going to do our best to reach out to you directly afterward. And we'll be sending out a handout after the webinar to recap all the important facts and exercises and that sort of thing. Just a reminder, your presenters today are Sebastian, who's our clinical director and PT at Spear West 67th Street, and Alberto, who is a PT at our Brooklyn Heights office. So feel free, their information's up there. Go ahead and jot it down. Their contact info, you can reach out to them directly if you have any questions or if you ever want to schedule an appointment. Our Q&A moderator is John McCary. doing a good job in the background today. He's a clinical director and physical therapist at our Long Island City office. And I'm Derek Lee, again, clinical director and PT at our Murray Hill office. Feel free to reach out to us directly. Our information's up there too. We're more than happy to help facilitate getting you an appointment with one of our great therapists. At Spear, we treat a wide array of conditions from head to toe. And as a reminder, we're open for in-person visits as well as still taking telehealth sessions. If you feel like you need and could benefit from individualized guidance and treatment, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're more than happy to coordinate that for you and set up an evaluation. On the screen right now is a little bit about our upcoming virtual 5K. We just ask, it's a fundraiser for diversity inclusion within the physical therapy occupational world. You get a free t-shirt, mask, and digital badge, as well as receiving more additional running tips. So the sign up right there is at spearcenter.com/5K run. And lastly, we're going to be continuing to host more webinars throughout all of 2021, covering a variety of topics. We're really, really excited about it. We look forward to seeing you guys there. So please follow us on social media. Keep checking your inboxes, and you're going to learn more about all the upcoming topics and the schedule. Thank you all so much for spending time with us today. And we really hope you enjoyed it and you learned something. We wish you all the best. See ya.
Thank you.